On a Saturday morning, when I was 14, my mom, who was 44 at the time, was cleaning across the hall from my room when she called out in pain from a terrible headache. 10 days later, she was pronounced dead. After the funeral, relatives descended on our home, and they started taking her belongings. They took her clothes, they took her jewelry, they took her mementos, and as her only daughter, I had no idea what she would have wanted me to have. We never talked about it. Watching parts of her leave with them really broke my heart, and it broke some of those relationships. I so wish I'd had a chance to talk to my mom about her wishes, about her values, about her legacy, about inheritance. I had no idea at that time that this was going to shape my purpose and my career. I ended up getting a Master's of Science of Social Work and focusing on human potential and complex family dynamics. And I use it to work with families that have family businesses, family offices, family foundations, on how to communicate effectively about what they have and build authentic trust so that they're preparing and empowering the next generation for their inheritance. When people learn about this, they often share with me their stories of unresolved issues related to inheritance that have created estrangement or resentment in their families. And perhaps you've heard stories like this, or maybe it's part of your own story. And there's going to be millions more. Why? Because we're in the midst of what's being called the Great Wealth Transfer, where some estimates are as high as $106 trillion being received in inheritance over the next 25 years in the United States alone. So with all of this money transferring and with relationships at stake, what is it that keeps families from talking about inheritance? Well, they seem to be caught in the same paradox, where the parents will say, I'm so worried that if my kids learn about their inheritance, they'll become entitled and they'll lose their drive. And their children of all ages will tell me, I'm so worried about not knowing what's expected of me or what to expect. And I have so many questions, but I don't dare ask. This silence creates this vacuum, and it gets filled with anxiety and assumptions and misunderstandings. Parents work really hard with their advisors to protect their assets. They create trust structures, they do tax planning, but they avoid the conversations in the family that build trust, that protect the relationships. What I can share with you from over 2 decades of working with multi-generational families are the ones that successfully navigate their inheritance transitions well. They don't just transfer their assets and their valuables. They transfer and they align their values with their valuables. And it all starts with a conversation. So let me share with you 2 conversation starters you can use to talk about inheritance without necessarily talking about money. The first is, if you're giving the inheritance, talk about the stories behind it. In one family, and all examples I give are anonymized, the grandparents took their grandchildren to see all the income properties that they had acquired over 40 years. And they told stories. They talked about their first deal, they talked about the property that almost bankrupted them, and they shared the values that really drove their decision-making and motivated them. One granddaughter shared, I had no idea how my grandparents were so frugal. I didn't understand it until I heard about how they almost lost everything. Now it makes sense. You can open up a conversation like this by saying something like, you've been benefiting from our fortunate financial situation. I'd like for you to understand how we got to be in this place. And there might be aspects to the story you've never heard before. In order to decrease this likelihood of entitlement, take time to share the struggles and the challenges and the failures along with the successes. And this gives them the knowledge of the values and the responsibilities that come with the family resources. Now, if you're an inheritor or think you're going to be, you can ask about purpose. I was working with a family and they were working on their purpose statement. And this is a process where they work together to define how they're going to use their resources to support the people and the causes that they care the most about. Now, the daughter, who had prepared really well for this, was silent. So I encouraged her to speak up, and she said, "What if we had a bigger vision for our purpose? What if we included world peace in our purpose statement?" And her family was like, "Are you crazy? We can't do world peace. That's impossible." And she said, "I know, but what if we used it as a guiding aspiration and we chose one area that really we could make an impact in?" She then shared the research she'd done on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. They looked at it, they were really impressed by what she'd done, and they chose one that was in keeping with their values. So their purpose statement read something like, "We steward our resources to provide education, opportunities, and security for our family while furthering world peace through initiatives that bring access to education locally and globally." They got involved in the local school board, and that daughter volunteered in India at a program that they funded. You can open up this conversation by simply asking, what do you think is the purpose of our wealth? Or, how can we use our resources to best further our values in the world? In this way, you're showing up interested and engaged with the family and the wealth and the resources, but not from a place of, what does it mean for me, or numbers, but more from a place of, I really care, and I want to know what our shared purpose is with this. When we don't have conversations like these, it doesn't matter how much money we have. We're likely to experience conflict, hurt, resentment related to inheritance. My family, all that time ago, other families, it turns out most families have something in common. We let silence do the talking. And silence, it turns out, is a terrible communicator. Families that talk openly about their purpose and their meaning behind their assets, behind their wealth, they strengthen their relationships. They build trust, and they build legacies that last. My mother's sudden death showed me how imperative it is to have these conversations sooner rather than later. So to honor her legacy, I ask, are you letting silence do the talking? Thank you.